really excited to learn all about Jews and food, and made this. So anyway, so I think we're on a journey, and uh, Rabbi Mike, I'm going to turn this over to you, and as people join in, I'll let them in the class. Okay.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Hope you can hear me all right. It's great to see all of you here. And my mother, stepfather, I can see her in Ira Pierce down there in the corner. I welcome them as well from Margate, New Jersey. And all of you from around the country in California and Mission Viejo and Orange County and Tustin and all those areas and even South Carolina as well for the time being. I'm really thrilled to be here today and to begin this conversation that Marcia had invited me to begin with you all around Jewish topics and food, which is something very near and dear to my heart. So I figured I'd give you a little bit of a background as to how we got to the conversation we're going to have today, which will be the first of three conversations. The topics that we decided to embark on together are coffee, wine, and challah. So if you've got a cup of coffee or something that you want to enjoy while we're talking, today's topic will primarily be focused on coffee. And from there, we'll go into these other topics together. So my interest begins in Jewish food, back in the early 2000s. And I was living in New Hampshire at the time. And I became friends with a couple of Jewish farmers, some folks that had just moved on to not quite a communal land trust, not quite a moshav, but something similar, let's say. And we were talking at the time about how to raise and slaughter chickens for kosher consumption. And it took me down what I would say a very interesting, lovely, engaging, lifelong pursuit of kosher food, what makes food Jewish, what makes food kosher, how do we engage in that today, and how do we let it come to our tables, and how do we let it come to our refrigerators, and how do we let it come to our lives? Well, you probably already know that getting kosher meat, chicken or otherwise, is a little bit more complicated than creating coffee. I learned that pretty early on. And while I certainly love the study and engaging in the work with the animals, a lot of my interest is in sustainability, is in creating connections between people. The idea that the food we eat today that's so easy to just go and grab from a supermarket shelf or wherever it is so distant from those who create it. Those of us who enjoy farmers markets and other types of outdoor farming or shopping, we can engage a little bit with the farmers and see what they're bringing in. But I find that for most of us, it's easy. You go and you grab something, you grab the coffee off the shelf, put it in your grinder, for example, or you put it in your coffee maker. So over time, I thought, I really love coffee. I really love values. I'm a values-driven rabbi. Um, I should probably have started my training is in. I started out at the Jewish Theological Seminary in Columbia University in the undergraduate program there, where I focused in Jewish liturgy at the Jewish Theological Seminary and comparative religion at Columbia University. I did a few years in graduate school before going to the rabbinical school at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. And it was there that I began the a love of what I'll call hands-on Judaism, and certainly hands-on Judaism, things that we do with our hands would include sofrut, writing mezuzah, or calligraphy for the Torah or something like that, but certainly also things like how does food get to our table? How do we create kosher food? How do we create and elevate the foods for ourselves that we consume in all these ways throughout our lives and throughout the holidays. So it turns out, and this was my own journey that I really loved coffee. I still do. I love coffee. I love drinking good coffee. I appreciate it. Like some people at this point might say they appreciate wine or scotch or something along those lines, where you're tasting it and you're really enjoying it. Trying to figure out all the levels of flavors, all of the terroir, like what was coming out of the soil that created that specific flavor profile. And for me, I was constantly pretty much disappointed by what I saw were the organic, fair trade beans, the coffee the values of which I really wanted in my cup, but the flavor profile just tasted not lovely. I'll be kind. I didn't love what I was tasting. It pushed me into this this an exploration. How does coffee get produced? Where does it come from? How are we drinking it? Um, what does it do to us when we're drinking it? What does it do to our psyche? What does it do to our community? And slowly but surely, I created something that went from a home-based hobby, if you will, on a what looked like a toaster oven on steroids that would produce about three-quarters of a pound of coffee at a time, to what I have now, which are roasting machines that will either prepare 1 kilo or 3 kilos per roast, depending on what I'm doing at the time. Just to give you an idea, the the 3 kilo machine puts out, let's say, roughly 5.5 pounds by the time we're done roasting it, and the 1 kilo puts out like 2.5 pounds when you're done roasting it. So the larger machine I can use when I was doing cafe orders and larger orders for whatever I was packaging for the holidays, and the smaller machine was for special orders, tastings, and other things like that. So let's talk a little bit about the history of coffee, because that's how I got to the point of I love coffee, and I started a company called Roasting Rabbi Coffee. Now, the company for the time being is a little bit on hold as I've been adjusting my life and doing some different work. It should be back open in a couple of weeks for our holiday sales for at least a single purchase um, of different varieties of coffees. The one we'll probably launch for the holidays is going to be Java Nagila, which is our number one selling blend. Of course, how could it not? It's joyous, it's lovely, it makes you sing and dance. Um, but so let's take a look. I'm going to do a screen share here, and if my computer behaves and everything does like I think it is, let's see, share screen share. Uh, okay, let's see. It might take me 1 second here to get the screen share up, and if not, well, here we go. Share, and then do you. To-do. Excellent. Hey, look at that. Okay, so you're looking at here a couple of things on your screen just so you can get an orientation. It should be on the left side of your screen that you can see coffee growing and in its ripening stage. The coffee bean, when it's ripe, is really a cherry. I'm going to hopefully use the correct terms, but we all use beans. It's really a cherry. And so when it's ripe, typically it's red or dark red, as you can see. On the tree, on the bush, it doesn't all happen at the same time, as you can even see in the picture. Um, it grows kind of like in stages like that. Behind that picture of the coffee on the tree, you'll see roasted coffee to a medium stage, I would say. I'm not being too scientific about that picture. Um, and then you can see a drawing, a botanical drawing of the coffee plant, the flower itself, which is small, white, and fragrant, very fragrant. If you're familiar with lemon, I'm not going to say it's as sweet as smelling as the lemon tree. We all know that the lemon flower is sweet. Peter, Paul, Mary taught us that. But the coffee flower is also very sweet. You can try that, and you can see what the cherries look like as they're ripening in that one drawing. Okay. Okay, so now a little bit of history. This is where the rabbi in me gets intrigued. So I love midrash as my like the way I like to study Torah and weekly portions. And so when we study the history of coffee and people say like, where's coffee from? What we get is, in my estimation, a lovely midrash. And this midrash, meaning it's the fact from the history, from the storytelling is really so intertwined, we it's almost impossible to take it all apart. So coffee, and now and when I often run these classes, I'll say, how long has people been drinking coffee? And I'll kind of go around the room and get people opinions. So I'll ask you to think for a second, how long do you think people have been drinking coffee or consuming coffee as a beverage for? And then I'll give you the answer. The answer basically is that people have been drinking coffee as far as we can tell from this midrash from around the 10th century, maybe the 11th century of the Common Era. It was surprising to me to learn that. I thought people had been drinking coffee forever, since Moses' time or before. That's something, but apparently it really wasn't until a much later time. So here's the midrash, and I say that because what we can trace on coffee historically is a little bit different than we can start with its origin. It starts in Ethiopia, and Ethiopia happens to be the place where coffee grows wild. It still grows in the wild. There's thousands of varieties. We don't know most of what's growing out there in the wild. And the story goes something like this. There was a sheep herder, a goat herder. Already, I hope to you, because to me already, I started hearing that sentence. I thought, this sounds familiar to my ears. There's a goat herder, and he's taking care of his goats, and they're up in the hills, and it's like 2, 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and the goats should be asleep. And instead of sleeping, or no, so Kaldi, who is the sheep herder, goat herder, goes out to go look for the goats that should be sleeping at this time, and lo and behold, walks around some corner and sees a tree, and the next to the tree, the goats are dancing and prancing around, and the tree's glowing and it's red, and he doesn't know what this thing is. So Khaldi thinks to himself, I'm going to go over there. Maybe I'll try and get some of this wonderful, you know, glowing fruit off of this tree. And he consumes some of this fruit off of this tree, and he gets inspired and full of all kinds of crazy energy. So to me, I'm already like, this sounds so familiar. I've got Moses at the bush that is not going to be consumed. It's this whole idea of that bush. Is it on fire? Is it not on fire? Is it burning? Is it not burning? What's happening with it? And I have this image of this goat herder going around the corner to see a bush that's like a large blueberry bush of sorts. And it's glowing, or is it glowing? Is it glistening? Is it not glistening? And it's giving off energy that he's never experienced before. And I think, wow, as a Jewish person, I can relate to this idea. Now, on the page before you, you can see two images. One on the left side of your screen is a late medieval sketching of who they think Kaldi is. Of course, you can tell it's European, right? Because when Europeans draw images of what they think are things like whether it's Jerusalem or whether it's Ethiopia or the goat herder, it doesn't look very Ethiopian to me, to my eyes. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. On the right side of the page, you see from an Ethiopian drawing, actually from one of the town's regions where coffee is thought to have originated. Their own drawings of the legend of Khaldi and the goats that are jumping. Okay, let me get back to the midrash. So Khaldi's got all this energy, grabs up a handful of these cherries and brings them home to the wisest person he knows, who's his wife. Says to his wife, look, now here's another midrash or a story. Maybe it'll ring with you, true with you guys too. Look, I have magic beans. No one's ever seen these before. They're going to bring us good luck. And his wife says, You are crazy. No one's ever heard of these things before. But yeah, but if you think you're so smart, go and take them to the Sufi monks. They're sitting down there in the village, and if they're so great, they will let us know. So Kaldi grabs a bunch of his of his cherries. He brings them to this group of Islamic mystics. They're the Sufis who are known to meditate and chant and practice various forms of mysticism. So Caldi shows up all excited. Hey, interrupts this group of scholars and says, "I have magic beans," and they promptly say, "You go away." I imagine like Shammai and Hillel's story, where the person that wants to convert to Judaism first shows up at Shammai's door and says, "Convert me to Judaism." Tell me all about Torah in one sentence, and I'll convert to Judaism. And Shammai beats him with a stick and says, "Go away, you're not serious enough." And then he shows up at Hillel's doorstep, says, tell me all of the essence of Judaism and Torah while I stand here on one foot. And Hillel says, "Do unto others as they will do unto you." The rest is commentary. Now go and study. So similarly, these guys go, "Ichfer, go away. What are you talking about?" And they throw the cherries into the fire, which is keeping them warm. And out of this fire comes the most amazing, enchanting smell of now the coffee beans being roasted. The chief Sufi monk then goes and scrapes out some of these beans that are now roasted, eats some of them, finds them to be absolutely delicious, fills him with an amazing sense of energy, and says to Khaldi, "You have won the prize. You've done it, my friend. This is the most magical bean I've ever tasted." That is the midrash. That is the background story to how we get coffee. According to history, as far as we can tell, basically, coffee is brought from Ethiopia to Yemen across the small strait and planted there by the Sufi monks and grown agriculturally. So the story gives us, this midrash gives us a couple of true starts. One is that coffee was originally eaten, not drank. That two, it was the Sufi monks that really helped bring this product, this agricultural gem from Ethiopia in the wild, and then planted it for the first time in Yemen. It's in Yemen that it is grown and exported for the first time from a port that we probably all know. It's called the Port of Mocha. Now, here's the amazing thing about coffee. It takes, we think, from about, let's say that year, about 1100, 1200 or so, where people are eating it. It's actually, we think, similar to a granola bar, an energy bar, that it's prepared with like honey into like a ball, and then you could you go hunting, gathering, whatever you're going to do. You can walk around with it. You could take it with you out in the field. You could eat little bits of it. It was energizing. It was nourishing. It takes some time for it to move through the Muslim world, through the Arabian Peninsula. In fact, all the way up to Turkey. So let's see, what's the next slide here? Okay. From Ethiopia and Yemen, the next thing that happens, well, first of all, a couple of things happen. One is exporting it as a crop that was already prepared meant that you couldn't plant it anywhere else. When you got the coffee beans from the port of Mocha and they were exporting them out, you were unable to plant the tree anywhere else. You were only able to consume those beans. As As the product, let me do this first. Let's move coffee from Turkey into the European world, because that's really when things start to shift. As coffee makes its way to Turkey, the next thing that happens is, as the Ottoman Empire expands, it reaches at its height on its expansion militarily. It reaches Austria and it reaches Vienna. As the Turkish army reaches Vienna in the 1500s, what happens next is there's a battle, and there's a spy on the Austrian side that comes up to the Austrian troops and says, I know exactly how to defeat this group of soldiers. After you defeat this group of soldiers, there's only one thing I want. They have a bag. They see those 6, 7 bags of beans sitting over there. I just want those beans. After the Austrian army defeats the Ottomans and pushes them back, the first Viennese coffee shop opens. And this is the first time Europeans are going to taste coffee. Now, the Europeans are going to call the coffee that they are going to drink Turkish coffee. Why would they call it Turkish coffee? Because it was the Ottoman Turks that delivered this product onto the European continent. For those of you who've had the blessing of traveling around the Middle East, being in Israel or the lands around Israel, we all would say, well, all the coffee that they drink there, like the traditional coffee, is what I would call Turkish coffee, or in Hebrew they call it bots. It could be Greek coffee. It's not filtered. It's prepared in a very specific way, ground to a powder, and then kind of brought up to a boil once or twice. Traditionally, originally, all this coffee is going to be served with a spice, cardamom, which in Hebrew we'll call hel, or pepper, or cinnamon, or cinnamon, or some kind of combination thereof. It's very, very strong coffee. It was prepared often in a large container. Maybe in places, I've seen it in Jerusalem, like in the old city, there'll often be the coffee like carriers. They kind of schlep around. It's in a big, it looks like a big gooseneck, and they can tilt it over and serve you a demitasse cup of this Turkish coffee, usually very, very, very sweet as well. So originally, coffee isn't filtered, right? So we're going to take that version of coffee, that Turkish coffee, and that's going to be the way we consume it. Now, okay, so now we're on European soil, and the Europeans are now discovering this great drink, this great crop. Sadly, quite frankly, the arrival of coffee, the arrival of sugar, the arrival of chocolate on the European continent into Western palates is all going to be on the backs of slaves and countries that were conquered and colonized. It's the way that it begins, certainly, and for me, part of why I will seek out organic, fair trade, farmer sourced coffee as best I can, because I understand that the history, it can be so ugly and horrifying. I want to try and elevate the pleasure that's in my cup. If this gives us pleasure, I mean, what we need in life. Okay, I need coffee, but I don't need coffee. It's going to give me pleasure: coffee, sugar, chocolate. I want to get the best, the best tikkun, the best Jewish value in that experience as I can. Okay, so let's get back to it. So now coffee reaches the European continent, and the the brilliance, remember, is that you can't plant it anywhere else. No one else can grow it yet. It takes for a monk to smuggle, as you see, 1665, you see the late Dutch over to India. We have a system by which the Dutch are able to get 6 plants smuggled into India, which they start growing in India. Indian coffee is interesting. It's unique. I don't, it doesn't, most people don't seek it out, but if you can, you should try it. It's interesting. The Dutch figured out that it wasn't really doing well enough that they were going to keep it there for long. And so they moved it to their next colony, which was in Java. And in Java, as you can imagine, all of a sudden, the coffee that's grown is excellent. It grows very well, very abundantly. And so now, all of a sudden, for the next 100 years or so, we've got two markets that are the only two markets selling this product. That is Mocha out of the port of Mocha in Yemen and out of Java. So you've got both the control of the Ottomans at this point and the control of the Dutch at this point. Now the that's how coffee starts going around our globe. From there, it kind of takes off. One nation from another nation grabs a seed here and there, and you can plant all of a sudden, as you can see, in various places around Africa, and then you can see how it will move around the globe to the New World. Now, coffee will pretty much go between the tropics. It will not grow when it's too hot. It will not grow when it's too cold. It needs basically grows best when it's mountainous, when it's hot in the daytime, cool in the nighttime. Yes, there's a lot of coffee in Brazil. It, to grow in Brazil, it's really hard to sustain it because it's not quite the right climate. There's a lot of flat lands and a lot of open lands. Okay, so now coffee.
I'm sorry, Mike, I have a question. So I'm looking.
Yeah, please jump right in.
So the coffee itself, the origins you said would have been like, let's say in the 10th century, meaning we're looking in the 900s. Somebody saw some goats jumping around and people started drinking that, but that was really relegated to the African regions in which it was growing, in which it was found. It didn't
Correct.
start to move until when? Actually, actually move.
All right, so we don't find it on the European continent until around the 15th century.
Like the 1400s. But when did it get to Yemen? Did it get to Yemen like in the 1200s or?
Yeah, so the back. So if you look on that little slide there, you see
Yeah.
Ethiopia
Yeah.
500 to 1500. It,
Yes.
it reminds me of when I talk, when we talk Jewish history, and now the biblical period.
Right.
It's 3,000 years, but we just lump it all together. So we just don't know exactly. We know that by 1500, there are crops being grown in Yemen that are being exported.
Okay.
Before that, we just have midrash. We're like, is it? Isn't it? It's eaten. It's consumed. Was it? But it wasn't grown. It was gathered in the wild. So today, when I get coffee, when we get it from Ethiopia, it won't say a variety. It will say heirloom varietals because almost all of the farms in Ethiopia are grabbing so many varieties of wild things that are nice. It's hard to distinguish them.
Last
So
minute.
what?
Well,
Yeah.
just my last question. I'm sorry. Is
Yeah.
and did Jews ever get in the coffee business?
Oh, so thank you. That was a beautiful segue. So look up here where it says Amsterdam. And I'm going to point you to one of David Liss is a great author. And he wrote a book called The Coffee Trader. The Coffee Trader traces, history, but puts it into fiction. So here's what happens. Now let's fast forward to 1492, and the Jews are expelled from Spain, and many Jewish people wind up in Amsterdam, but other Jewish people wind up all the way across the Ottoman Empire, and it creates a wonderful network. A great network of traders trading things, amongst other things, trading coffee. The first stock exchange that traded goods in the world was in Amsterdam, and it was opened to trade coffee, and largely by Jewish refugees from Spain who had these connections and had business links to family members and others back east across that Ottoman Empire to bring coffee to the West. So that's level one. Um, there are various conversations. I should go into the religious conversation early on in Islam. So let me say this: as coffee emerges in the world, none of the religious leaders like it. Everybody's looking for an excuse to say no. And I love coffee because I believe what it has done and can do is bring people together. And for many religious leaders, that threatens the idea that they're separate groups. So, for example, in Islam, the debate early on is it wine? It gives you some kind of intoxication, and it seems to make you feel different. Now, I'm a Reconstructionistly trained rabbi, went to the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, and one of the things we learn is that often in religion, it's the people that drive decisions or drive the culture. So with coffee, it's a great conversation. So in Islam, there's a couple of leaders that are like, we don't, it's not okay. And enough people push back and say it's not wine, it's not intoxicating, and we really like it. So we're going to keep drinking it. The Jewish conversation went as follows, if you could imagine. People are calling it a bean. Well, is it a legume? Can we have it for Passover? Is it kosher for Passover? Is it kosher all year long? Fortunately, it's not a bean, it's a seed. We're really taking a cherry pit, we are drying it, we are roasting it, we are grinding it, but it is not a bean. So early on, the rabbis are trying to push against it. The pushback is, nope, it's actually okay. Finally, we have Christian conversations, primarily Catholic conversations about whether it's good, bad, can you drink it, can you not drink it? And the best thing that the Catholics can come up with at the time is it allows Christians, Jews, and Muslims to gather together, so we shouldn't allow people to drink it. Which brings me to what, well, okay, we'll have this. Let's go next. Okay, so you can see next, coffee can travel throughout the colonial world, right? It's going to go from South America up even through Central America into North America. It's around Africa. It's around the Arabian Peninsula. In the history now of, what's my next slide here? Okay, so here's how coffee would have been originally prepared. If you've had Turkish coffee or if you've had Ethiopian coffee, you can go to an Ethiopian coffee ceremony in places like Washington, D.C. They've got great Ethiopian restaurants, and you can go to where they prepare the coffee, roast it, grind it, and prepare it for you fresh. The coffee used to be prepared in an ibrick, but that's where you would put this fine powder to the bottom, boil it up, add your spices, and then pour it out to people in little demitasse cups. Often sat around and with lovely conversation. Movable around the globe, as I was saying earlier, just to show you some of these historical pictures. You can imagine that there were people that gave up their water as they traveled around the globe on ships so that they could water their personal coffee plants, which is part of the story of how the coffee plant originates in places like Brazil. Now, in the Ottoman Empire, as we were saying, as you can see here, now we're talking 19th century, the coffee house itself is what threatens a lot of religious leaders. For me, the coffee house actually could be the solution to so many of the world's problems. It probably still is. The coffee house brought together all kinds of people to have all kinds of conversations. And unlike the tavern, which, let's just point out, if you were Islamic, if you're Muslim, you're not going to a tavern to begin with. You're not going to drink whatever they're serving there. If you're Jewish or Muslim, 9 times out of 10, you aren't going to be eating what they're serving in the tavern. And as all of us know, whether it's in films or stories or whatever it is, nothing good ever happens at a tavern at night. I mean, the people don't tend to come out having lovely philosophical dialogue and arms around each other. It usually ends up in some kind of a brawl. However, in coffee houses, while people would become excited, they might become invigorated by the dialogue of what is God and who is God and why are we here in this world, it promotes and stimulates connections between people. And I think that when you get up to the hierarchy of religious authority, that is what threatened religious authority. The ability for people to really get together and have dialogue and see each other as people. You know, it led to mixed dancing. And if it leads to mixed dancing, who knows what's next? So I wanted you to see this photo as to what a coffee house and Starbucks should only, idolize or whatever it is, so we can have good dialogue. But that's my vision. I believe that um, a world cafe of sorts is really a hope for many of us if we can have those Socratic conversations, as if you will. So okay, before I get into this next photo, I just want a little bit of history for us. So in the history of the United States of America, if you could imagine, you have to go back now to 1776, and where the people of the United States of America, are about to start a war with the British. Now, the British and the British soldiers and all of their leaders are going to be hanging out in tea houses. As we know from the Boston Tea Party, the British were not very happy when we got rid of all the tea. However, there are coffee houses. And what we do know is that in Boston and in Philadelphia, at least, some of the American Revolution was planned in coffee houses because it was well known that the British were not hanging out inside the coffee houses. The Declaration of Independence was read aloud on the steps of a coffee house in Philadelphia and a coffee house in Boston. And so, as you can see, even to our country, even if it wasn't the best coffee at the time, certainly played a very important role in what it meant to be this place, this country. So now, right, so the Jewish community in particular found the benefit in coffee the same way that the Muslim community found coffee to be beneficial, which is in order to keep people awake at night, to do tikkun, to do whatever we wanted to have, the stay awake all night for Shavuot, have a wake up at midnight so we can have special davening, have ourselves ready for prayer early in the morning. Coffee became this wonderful, amazing, potent drink that was parve, right? It wasn't meat, it wasn't milk. You didn't have to wait to have it. You didn't have to wait to drink it. You could have it hot, you could have it cold, you could have it sweet, you could have it savory. It really is something special. The next iteration for all of us becomes how we make it. And the next two steps almost happen right around the same time, within, let's say, about 20, 30 years of each other. The first of which is the filter. And we have to thank, in Germany, a very, very important woman. Mrs. Melita was a very, very smart lady. She was preparing coffee one day in her home and could not figure out the best way to get the grinds, because you have to imagine it was always just grind in your coffee. And so she was trying to figure out a very effective way to get the grinds out of her coffee. So went over to the desk and took out some of the blotter paper that was there, poked a few holes in the blotter paper, put the blotter paper on top of a pot, poured the coffee over the pot, and invented for all of us the first coffee filter. About 20, 30 years later, with the invention of electricity, comes the espresso machine. Now, espresso is all done through pressure. So you needed to have high pressure and you needed electricity to generate that machine that would give you the small pour of espresso. And then you had the espresso bar. And you could see on the bottom right corner a little bit of the traditional Italian espresso bar where you could pull up, spend 10, 15, 20 minutes with your friends, having conversation at the first coffee clutch in Germany. And along with it went, of course, one of my favorite Jewish foods, German coffee cake, which of course had to be parve or dairy with no lard in it. Now, interestingly enough, it took a long time for Germany and the Jews in Germany to appreciate coffee. And if you're really into the history of coffee, I want to direct you to the book that I have up there on the right, Jews Welcome Coffee by Robert Lieberlis. It really is a great academic look into how not only it gets introduced into the community, why it's a little bit slow to take off, and the questions Jewish people were asking. And because it was later in Jewish history, there's a lot more written down about it in the way it kind of, we're talking, I think now we're talking 18, probably around the 18th century into the 19th century period in Germany. It's late. And so, interestingly enough, if you think about it, Germany is the only country of the colonizing nations that did not have a coffee producing nation. Brazil, Portugal, France, Spain, and all of those countries had, the Netherlands had their own coffee producing countries, like somewhere or whatever they were. Germany did not, and that might have been one of the reasons why, but if you're interested in history, I want to direct you to that book. And you can see on the left, The Coffee Trader, the book I mentioned by David Liss. He also has a book on paper, similarly, historical fiction on the role of paper and paper reduction and the printing press. And as you might imagine, there's a bit of Jewish life involved with that one as well. So as we come forward in time, I'm going to turn off the screen share. As we come forward in time, what happens with Jewish life and coffee is that longer conversation of into the 20th century, how people are going to consume it, and is it kosher? One of the most brilliant marketing schemes of the earliest 20th century was taken on by the Maxwell House Company right around 1929 or so, when they come out with their first Maxwell House ad to make sure that everybody knows instant coffee is kosher all year round and kosher for Passover. You can get your Maxwell House Haggadah with your can of Maxwell House coffee. It takes until around the 1970s for coffee to shift from the Maxwell House Folgers style coffee into what I'll call the Starbucks revolution. The Starbucks revolution brought to all of us the idea that fresh made, fresh roasted, sourced coffee can be delicious, can be brought right to us and brought right in front of us. It doesn't have to be stale, it doesn't have to be old, and it doesn't have to be instant to be delicious. That's called third wave coffee. The third wave began really with thanks to places like Starbucks and Peet's and some of these other companies that brought us from the gas station coffees of the world to where we are today. And while Starbucks might be the largest producer, it really has allowed the globe, a lot of the world, to see what coffee can be like, how you can drink the coffee, like what it means to taste it, what it means to access it, what it means to see it being prepared for you by a person that's called a barista, right? Someone that's got some training behind them. For me, my interest is in connecting with the farmers and connecting with the way in which the product can elevate values. So when I got into the coffee itself and sourcing coffee, I wanted to look for coffees that were either produced by, let's say, a group of women that, let's say, 300 to 400 women that have a small plot of land that can raise crops together, that can bring it to one uh, washing station that can be analyzed and rated, right? So coffee is rated like wine on a scale from 0 to 100, and good coffee is from 80 to 100. Or let's say, I'm looking for coffee that's got a good story behind it. So it could be like from that group of women, let's say, and they've rated the coffee as 85, 87, 88. This is excellent coffee. I want to try that coffee because I know not only is it going to taste good, it's got a great story to it. Let's say the coffee that I'd sourced from Costa Rica was a Jaguar project. So $1 out of every pound went to a Jaguar rescue project. To me, that spoke to my values. And it was like, look, you can go to a coffee shop and find coffee from any of these countries, any of these regions. I knew that. But if I could find a story that spoke to me, that was like a good story that spoke to one of those Jewish values I'm speaking about, I thought that's the one I want to bring to my company. So it's something a little bit different, something that you could talk about, that you could taste together, and hopefully will be excellent. So that's a little bit about how I arrived where I'm at. Like I said earlier, the wonder of coffee in the Jewish world is that it's kosher by definition. It's kosher all year round. The only thing that would alter that in any sense is going to be if it's flavored, which, as you've noted, probably if you like coffee with flavors, I've noticed this. It went from pre-flavored coffees, like you bought it in the bag with its flavor kind of on it, to the way it is now, where you have a squeeze bottle of some sort. Oh, you like hazelnut, so you squeeze in some hazelnut, or you like mocha, so you squeeze in some chocolate. Um, when you add in flavors, whether it's onto the coffee bean itself or you're using one of those squeeze bottles, that's where the kosher question will come in. Is that product kosher? But the coffee itself, the coffee bean, the coffee by definition, it's kosher all year round, all the time. Now, I did not mention yet decaf. So decaffeinization is a process. And the only way in which that would cause a question to come in about kashrut would be for Passover. Why? I had to study this question a long time. So, in order to make decaffeinated coffee, the coffee bean is soaked in a bath. That bath is going to be some kind of combination of chemicals. While it might say Swiss water, Mexican water, it's not water you would drink. It's not water you'd want to consume or cook with. It has other things in it that help pull out the caffeine. And what would then happen is they would drop out the liquid from the bottom of the container that's got the caffeine in it, let the beans re-dry, and then sell you decaffeinated coffee beans. That liquid often will be then made, dried itself, the caffeine taken out, made into caffeine pills. So originally, if you could imagine, decaffeinated coffee in the 1930s was made by soaking it in benzene, which took out the caffeine and did not extend your life very long. Thank God that went away. But the process of making decaffeinated coffee is challenging because it really changes the flavor. It mutes it. It makes it a little bit less something. So people will experiment with those chemicals to keep that rich flavor in. Um, in some places, they'll use ethylene alcohol, which is the byproduct of sugarcane. When they're making sugar from sugarcane, when we get our sugar, whether it's turbinado sugar, white sugar, brown sugar, the liquid byproduct is an ethylene alcohol. In a sustainable way, I had been seeking out decaffeinated coffee that was made with ethylene alcohol taken from the sugarcane process. So it was sustainable. You weren't wasting any of this process. And because it was ethylene alcohol from sugarcane, I love the way the decaf tasted because it left it a little bit sweeter. It left it tasting delicious. So that process would be the only thing that would cause someone to say, what is it made with to make it decaf? Is it kosher? Right. So 9 times out of 10, that process is kosher and kosher all year round. If they were using, let's say, a ethylene alcohol from wheat and someone was making something and they were squeezing the wheat and they decided to use ethylene alcohol from wheat and you soaked your coffee beans in that alcohol, it wouldn't be kosher for Passover. It's a technicality, but that is where the question would come in because kosher coffee, as I said, in its straight form is kosher. It's kosher all year round. It's you can anywhere you are in the globe, you could drink it and rest assured you're safe. So that's a little bit of history of coffee, how I got myself into it, and what I'll call the spirituality of coffee about what it can help bring to us. Um, I really, really do think that if people could sit together over a cup of coffee and talk about their thoughts about the world, about religion, theology, life, afterlife, uh, I'll throw in politics. I think that's a way that we all could grow closer together. I really believe in this whole idea of a world cafe as maybe a simple way to get people together and even just start by talking about the coffee that you're drinking. Um, and so when I drink coffee, and I have got my coffee mug here, when I drink coffee, I drink it black. I was taught this when I first started roasting coffee because what it will allow me to do, like when I'm trying to taste wine, for example, if I taste the coffee in its raw form, I can get all the elements of it. And so if I want to taste 3 or 4 kinds, I'll taste them all black, even if I'm going to add a little sugar because it's maybe a little bit bitter. Or if I want to add milk because it's a little sour and I want it less sour. That's why people like to add a little milk and sugar. If you can train yourself, if you can like black coffee, if like go to it, then if it's off balance, you notice it a lot. You go, wow, it's sour. I think I need some milk in it because I want a balanced cup. I want the right amount of bitter and the right amount of sour and the right amount of nutty and the right amount of chocolatey, all sitting there in my mouth. I want it. I like a heavier feel in my mouth, but coffee tasting like wine tasting is up to you. I mean, you might like a white wine, and let's say Anne likes rosé, and Susan only likes Chardonnay, and I know Ray likes only champagne. But we all know there's good champagnes, there's not good champagnes, there's good Chardonnays, there's not good Chardonnays. So you have to taste enough of them to come around and say, oh, I like Ethiopian coffee. And I like, for example, and maybe what we'll do is we'll get to it next time, how coffee is prepared, how it's dried, you'll see washed coffee, natural processed coffee, fermented coffee. You can take the same coffee and prepare it each of those ways. An example would be beer. For those of you out here that might enjoy beer, the beer companies can add different yeast into the same formula, and you'll change the profile radically. It's the same base, but by changing the yeast, all of a sudden, um, it might make it more malty or more sour or more sweet. And so the way in which the coffee is dried before it even gets into the bag, before it even gets to roasting, will affect its profile taste also. So I've talked a long time, and I figured it would be an opportunity to see if you all have any questions for a few minutes here this morning, this afternoon, depending on where you are. So Anne,
I just wanted to
make
say
sure you unmute.
you're can you I should be unmuted now, yes? Okay, great.
Perfect.
Um, your discussion about the coffee houses and the morality reminded me in the mid to late 18th century in Germany and Austria, there must have been disputes about the morality going on because a couple of composers, Bach and Joseph Haydn, wrote these humorous pieces with texts
Yes,
about why coffee is not immoral and why coffee is not bad for youth and why coffee, in fact, contributes to social discourse. And Haydn took the
exactly.
text from Goethe, and it says water makes us. You can translate it as stupid or silent, and you learn this from the fish, because in the ponds they're silent, and when men drink water at the table, they're silent. So coffee is better than water.
Wow. I knew the Bach piece. I know and it's very funny. I mean, I don't usually think of
It's
Bach as
very funny.
humorous. It's really funny.
It's an argument from a daughter and a father where the daughter wants to drink coffee
So
and the father
and so
says
you
this is
put your
good and you're
right.
drinking too much and it's immoral,
It's leading to mixed dancing. You got it. Exact
leading to
every
mixed
time.
dancing.
Every time. So, but it's interestingly, right? So, in the history of what we drink, drinking water was dangerous. Drinking water was dangerous. People that's the another time. The history of prohibition and what why one of the reasons why everybody was drinking alcohol in the United States and to a certain point was because drinking the water would kill you because you because the problems of drinking water. So yeah, it's an interesting back and forth of how do you boil the water would take care of it, hot water. Yeah. Oh, good. But Goethe, I have to go check that one out. Okay, so Ria, you have a question. Is it Ria or Ree?
Ria. So
Ria.
um, this is just a practical question about the decaf.
Yeah.
When in purchasing decaf, how do you know the materials that were used? Because it doesn't say on the label.
Okay, so it should indicate in some way or another what the process is. The supermarket is going to be harder than a coffee shop, like let's say Pete's. And I would go to a small, and I say like something like a smaller chain, because that's where you could ask what processes the decaf, where you could seek out it's called EA. That's one I personally like, ethylene alcohol decaf. Um, that's the best way to look it up. You can look up what you could look up Swiss water. They're going to have their own website because it's its own trademarked organization as Mexican water decaf. They're going to have that in information somewhere. Hopefully, I said because I'm going to say bli neder as we say in Hebrew. Like, well, I think so. I mean, they should have that information there for people so you can understand what that is going into your food.
And this is just one other side thing
Yeah.
to ask about the Keurig, Keurig, which
Yes.
is also changed what we do and what you think of it.
Yeah. I'm not endorsed by the Keurig company. uh, I don't love it. I don't love the coffee product that it makes. Okay, so that's one answer. The other thing is when I was using it, if I do use it, and you can use it, please use it. If you love it, use it. I don't want to discourage you. I would encourage you to use refillable pods so you're not creating more waste, so that you're at least using your own coffee. You scoop it in, you can do it that way, and there's good ways of doing that. There are good companies making different types of refillable pods. You have to play around a little bit with the size of the grind and the strength of it so it works for you. And the last thing I'll say is please clean it because of the way it stores water, it can build up mildew, mold type things you don't want in your coffee. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it definitely changed stuff for sure. Okay, so we got two more hands up. I see Sylvia and Kareen. So let's go with Sylvia. Although,
Okay,
yeah, are you there?
I'm
Hi.
here. Thank you. That was fascinating. Thank you. I am a coffee lover, but what I found was you're something that made me feel good because I have started in the last couple of years to wean myself off of any dairy products. Not that I'm not all there. So, what to do with coffee? And oat milk doesn't grab me, or almond milk doesn't grab me in coffee, so I drink my coffee black. And I used to really like Starbucks,
Hmm.
and now I really like Bustelo because it's such a different taste and
Yeah,
richness about it that I get going black. So that was thank you very much. It was great.
absolutely. I find that the Starbucks coffee is bitter, and so I have to add milk for me. Like I'm adding milk to it, and so because black is not balanced, and so that's where I like Dunkin'. Like so, you have to learn how to drink coffee on the road around the United States too. I can't be too much of a coffee snob, so I could seek it out. One good lesson is if you really want good coffee, you're seeking out anywhere in the world, get an espresso drink. Whether you like latte, macchiato, whatever, because they have to grind that bean for you fresh to make that drink for you. That's the only one in the world where you're guaranteed to get it ground for you before you to drink it. So great, thank you. Okay, so who's next? Kareem.
Hi, I'm Corinne
Hi,
from
Kareem.
Mauritius, in Ireland in the Indian Ocean, where we're 12 hours ahead of you. And I was
Wow.
fascinated because I grow my own coffee. I've got two coffee trees that were introduced in Mauritius in 1721 from Mocha, Yemen, under the French colonization during 1710 to 1850. And it fascinated me because I grow my coffee, and when you talk about the flowers, the cherry beans, the roasting, it all spoke to me. It was so
Wow.
fascinating. I loved it.
That's excellent. Oh, I'm so excited to hear that. You know, some of my favorite coffee is from Bourbon or Reunion, and it's some of the
Mm.
old transferred coffee. Oh wow, that's fascinating. Unfortunately,
We're
my
neighbors,
coffee.
actually. We're neighbor
Go on.
islands. We call sister islands. Réunion and Mauritius are sister islands.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. That is great. Well, one of these days, maybe I'll get to taste some of your coffee beans. That would be great.
That
Safe
would be
travels.
cool.
That would be really cool. I had coffee plants until my cats. I have two cats. They decimated them. I was like, okay, no more coffee plants for now. I'll try again. But that's great. Oh, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Nothing like
You're
growing your
welcome.
own. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Other questions, Sandra?
Actually, this is just kind of an observation that it was from like about 15 years ago or more that we met somebody. It was in Las Vegas. My father was like in his 90s, and we met a realtor at the coffee place in one of the hotels at the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf. So what was interesting was when we left, my dad goes, "Did you notice that they have Jewish stars on all the in all the tables embedded in the tables at the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf?" So a
Huh.
Jewish guy. Did you know that a Jewish guy owns a Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf? I
Okay.
don't know if that's true anymore, but this is, like I said, 15 to 18 years ago. And the
That.
one over on Melrose in the Jewish area where my son
Mhm.
used to have his business down the street, they were closed on Shabbos because nobody would
Yeah.
go in there. Nobody would go in there
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
no,
that's
there are definitely places in the world where you can find that, whether it's LA, New York,
right.
there's Miami, certainly
So,
Jerusalem.
like I said, I don't know if he still owns it, but I thought it was an interesting observation on my
Yeah.
father's part at 90 something years old.
Whoa. I have to go check it out next time I go in and visit
Well,
one of
yeah,
them.
I don't know if they still own it, but I just thought it was interesting. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, this is a great conversation. I enjoy doing coffee tastings live, but I really enjoy doing it on Zoom as well. And you know, I'd be happy to continue the coffee conversation in the future. But the plans moving forward will be next week to discuss wine, and the following week to discuss challah and bread. Um, I am. I have to say I don't have a challah business or a wine business, but I really love talking about Jewish food and Jewish approaches to food in particular. Do you have anyone else have any questions before we say adieu, shalom, lehitraot?
Just to say thank you, Rabbi, for being here, and I hope you'll come back next week. I know it's going to be a very exciting and fun conversation.
Thank you. I'm really, really happy to meet all of you and to learn together with you all and to bring it around the globe. It's great to see all your faces. I hope you all have a blessed, wonderful, happy, healthy rest of your day. Lehitraot, shalom, and thank you again to all of you for being here, and particularly to Marcia and the Jewish Collaborative for putting this all together. I'm really blessed to be able to do this. Thank you.
We're blessed to have you.
Have a
Thank you. This was
have a great
great.
day. Bye.
Bye.